Mark Twain said it this way: there was never yet an uninteresting life. Such a thing is an impossibility. Inside the dullest exterior, there is a drama, a comedy, and a tragedy. Simply put, everyone has a story. I believe that too many people take theirs for granted. Some people never think about their story, their life story. Some people never process it, nor do people often learn from others. And even worse, most people never, ever tell their story. Over the next few weeks on the Wise Idea podcast, we are focusing on listening and learning from not just our life story, but from the life story of others and even those around us. We want to take our thinking about our own life story to another level. We want to have an appreciation for life in general and our lives in particular. It's hard, to fully appreciate parts of our life story, often while we're in the situations themselves. That's a thing called hindsight. One person said it this way: the historian is a prophet looking backwards. Arthur Conan Doyle of the complete Sherlock Holmes series said it this way: it is easy to be wise after the event. Oh, that's so good. Milan Kundera said it this way: we go through the present blindfolded. Only later, when the blindfold is removed and we examine the past, do we realize what we've been through and understand what it means. So simply put, we're going to evaluate our life stories. I ask you the question today: what is your life story?
Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris, focusing on life, leadership, family, marriage, and the church. We are providing tools for our inspiration and wisdom for life. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. If you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Here's our host, Christopher J. Harris.
Hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, and I'm so honored, so excited to have you on with us today. Listen, it has been and is an incredible journey. And I know if you listen to this podcast on a regular basis, you probably are saying, how many times is he going to say that this is an incredible journey? I'm probably going to say it every single week, because every conversation that we have literally takes us on a journey. And we are focused and we are on mission to provide everyday people with wise ideas. Our goal is to inspire you and to inspire your hearts and to motivate you, not just to touch you, but ultimately that leads to life transformation. And I believe we're on mission and accomplishing that mission. For those of you that are new to the podcast, I have 4 things that I'm personally passionate about, and therefore this podcast is focused on: life, leadership, family and marriage, and ministry. And many of our conversations dovetail and cover those 4 areas. Well, we have been in a series talking about life stories, and the goal has been to really help people to think about what is their life story. And we're doing that by listening to others' life story. And I've got an incredible guest on with me today. He is a brother. He's a brother. He's a friend. Every time we talk, we say we're only going to talk for 5 or 10 minutes, and it turns out to be 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, 30 minutes, whatever the case may be, because we have a good time chopping it up. And as one scripture in the Bible says, that iron sharpens iron. So we sharpen each other, we bounce ideas off, we push the envelope a little bit. And so I'm so excited to have Dacari Middlebrooks. How you doing, brother? Glad to have you on today, man.
How you doing, Christopher? I'm so excited to be with you today. Really honored and grateful that you consider me for your podcast. So I'm excited about it.
Man, it's been a long time coming because you got this book that came out that's shaking stuff up.
Yeah, I guess I would be lying to say I didn't think it would do as well as it's done, but I just didn't know how fast it would move and the response, a lot of the responses I would get from it. So yeah, you're right. It's doing crazy things for me.
I can tell you as an author that one of the best things that can happen when you write a book is that conversation is created from the book, from the topics that are covered. And undeniably, man, we can look on social media. There's colleges and universities, there's churches, there are millennial groups, there are seasoned groups that are all talking about the book, talking about what you talked about. And so we're gonna mention the book, but I think that there's some great value because I got the author of the book on. So the author of the book has a story behind the book. So I ain't got to quote the book. I got the author on today. So let's jump into the deep end of the pool and let's talk about why did you write this book? What happened?
Well, I think honestly, let me start off by saying this. I got tired of pretending to be happy. Like every day I would wake up and I was pretending that I was happy. I had an opportunity when I went to Morehouse for undergrad, left Morehouse, came to Vanderbilt Divinity School in Nashville, and from there my mentor and pastor hired me to be his assistant. So I had an opportunity to travel the world with him for 3.5 years, and then he and I decided, I want to do something different, and he put me over like 90% of the ministries, and I left from that role to working for actually building our virtual campus. And so I had the privilege of being connected to a pastor who was preaching to thousands and thousands of people a week. I would sit on the stage. Then I had opportunities with our fellowship to speak at conferences. And I was around and I was put in front of a lot of people, or a lot of people didn't know. After I would leave those stages or do training and leadership sessions, I would go back to my hotel room or go back to my house and I'd be crying, weeping like a baby. And a lot of times I didn't know why. I just knew I was unhappy. I felt like I had conformed to this church system. Me being ordained as an elder, that was something that I earned that right because I went to school. I did everything that I was supposed to do to get that. But that wasn't something that I needed to define me, right? So a lot of people I know, they let their titles let their titles become who they are. And I think I could not divorce myself from my title. I became Bishop's boy or this elder. And so there was an expectation from others for me to be what they deemed as an elder or a clergyman. And me, I've always been different. Like when Bishop Walker hired me, I was the hip-hop enthusiast, the guy with tattoos and a fitted cap. And like he told me, he said, yeah, you're vastly different than what I hired, but I know I need you, right? And so he placed value on me, but people around us thought that I should be something else. And in a sense, I tried to conform to that, and that ultimately brought me to a place of brokenness. Like literally, I was broken, and I got tired of pretending. So I said, just no longer can I keep waking up smiling. My marriage was failing. Like I couldn't, you can only pretend for so long. I literally hate when churches say you fake it till you make it. Well, faking it till you make it only works when no one's watching. Everybody's watching now, right? Social media is giving us a platform where everybody, they see your highlights, but they don't see your failures. And I got tired of pretending. And I truly believe this, Christopher, that you never become what you want until you stop pretending to be what you're not. You never become what you want until you stop pretending to be what you're not. And that, for me, was the reason I wrote the book, because I was pretending to be something, and it cost me more than I really was willing to pay.
Man, you just said a mouthful already. Pretending to be happy. Let's define that for a minute. For the people that are listening to this, Because I think oftentimes we have to redefine some things. I think we often are operating with the wrong definition, or the wrong definitions, I should say. So when you say you were pretending to be happy, what were you defining that happiness as?
Well, happiness, I learned this probably obviously the wrong way. I thought happiness would be something internal, right? I realized happiness, and it's a difference between happiness and joy, right? We learn that in church, right? Joy is something you can't really describe. There's something you can't really talk about, but it's a feeling. It's something internal that gives you some sense of like inspiration and insight to live a fruitful life, right? Happiness, though, I thought happiness was this internal feeling. Happiness for me, what I've learned is something external, right? You ever hear people say, well, my wife or my such and such no longer makes me happy. Well, I don't think they were ever actually supposed to make you happy. I think they were supposed to add to your happiness, right? And I think for me, happiness is some external thing. There's something like you putting me on the podcast makes me happy. But if you take the podcast away and I become unhappy, then you are the root of my happiness, right? So I think that for me, I was defining happiness based on some external thing. And when it started once it started to be like taken away, like this whole idea of working in ministry, and I remember transitioning out of my role with Bishop from his assistant. I remember calling Ty and asking him if he wanted my role, but from the outside, people thought I had been demoted. And that started to weigh on me, and I'm like, y'all don't even know. It's like, no. I called Ty. It's like, no. We did this as a like, and people were like, yeah, man, Bishop got a whole new guy. And so my happiness, in a sense, I started thinking, well, maybe did I get demoted? Maybe was it a setup from Bishop? I'm the one that brought the idea to him about me doing something. And so you start playing, and then once that happened, I started losing my relevance because I was no longer Bishop's assistant. I felt like. But man, I thought.
So really, Dacari, let me just interject this really fast, and I want you to pick right back up where you left off. I have a very diverse audience, and even some that are not church. So let me just connect some dots for people. So they'll understand a little bit about some context of what you're saying, which is a great thing, right? So the role that you were in, you were, by all intents and purposes, I'll use a business term, you were the chief of staff for a pastor who's leading a mega church, who's also traveling quite a bit, who's also involved in multiple business endeavors, who's also sitting on lots of boards. So you were on the go. Your bags were always packed. You were always traveling. You were always juggling, and you made a decision on your own without any prompting from him to say, I want to do something different. Let me transition into another role within the organization. You then called a friend who you felt like could do what you were doing and invited him as your successor to come and take over your role while you switched to the new role. And people in the organization did not have full context and assumed that you were sat down versus you moving yourself along. Is that accurate?
Almost. I wouldn't consider myself as chief of staff. I'd be more like an executive assistant, something like that, because I didn't oversee the staff, right? I kind of managed our CEO's day-to-day life, in a sense.
You were a personal chief of staff.
Something like, yeah, I can see that, yes. And the other part of it wasn't necessarily the people in the organization in terms of staff. It was more so the people that we served. So the congregants were the ones that thought. And, often they're the ones that kind of weigh the heaviest on you, as when you're serving people, they're like, well, what happened to you? It's not necessarily the people on the team. It was the people that would send me emails and send me Facebook messages trying to get information. And then you start hearing rumors, about the role and what happened. And so a lot of that affected me.
So what's crazy is I think this is a good segue into talking about expectations, talking about the expectations that we put on ourselves, talk about the expectations that other people put on us, talk about expectations of even because so the title of your book, the title of your book is called The Depressed Millennial. But I love subtitles. I always, and maybe this is just the nerd in me, right? I love subtitles of books because to me, you can couch the title of the book in different ways from a marketing standpoint, but the essence of the book is the subtitle to me, right? I actually spent more time on both of my books that are published working on the subtitle than I actually did the title.
Right.
So your subtitle is Surviving Unmet Expectations.
Yes. Yes.
Let's talk about it, man.
Well, I think that one, let's talk about expectations, right? I'm a millennial. Millennials, those of us, and I guess our base is based on the census. Some data is from 1980 to 2000, but based on the census, the current census, based in 1981 to 1996, right? So I'm in the early part of the millennials. I'm an early 80s baby. And I was a part of the generation that our parents are baby boomers. So the baby boomers and even their parents had this idea that if you went to school, you got an education, you'll come out and you'll find a good job. That was kind of like the standard, I think, probably across America in a lot of households, especially for those that were born in the 60s. That whole idea or theory that you go to school, get an education, come out and get a good job, that worked for Gen Y, right? It did not work for the millennials. Most of us, those of us, we graduated from college 2005, 6, 7 on up. That was like our era where we graduated. But guess what? The entire world had changed. We were in the middle of a collapse based on 9/11, and then we were going through wars and the recession. Like we were getting ready to elect a president, and obviously you know what happened in 2008 when President Obama became the president. We went through this bad recession, so the jobs, they weren't there. So many of us sacrificed what we wanted to do in order to just live. And one thing about millennials, if we can't find the job we want, we'll go back to school. But I tell anybody, we're probably one of the most educated generations. No one will outschool us. We'll keep going to school. We'll have 8 degrees with no money in order to fulfill some sense of like, you know what, I expect to get money if I get this degree. And so for me, the expectations were, once I left Vanderbilt Divinity School, I went to Morehouse and Vanderbilt. There was this expectation in my mind, based on those two great institutions, that I would come out and I would be offered something that was like, hey, we're going to pay you this tier money. You're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. And that didn't happen for me. I didn't know what an executive or personal chief of staff was, right? I wanted to do more serving in terms of I'm a community and mission-based person. I'm a digital guy. I'm a media guy. So how do I merge community and media and things like that together in order to create something substantial that'll give me some sense of purpose? And I was cool, like most millennials, we're cool the first year doing X, Y, and Z. But after the first year, I started to question whether or not I was fulfilled. And I think, honestly, now that I'm talking about this, going back to the root of the book, after pretending, what I realized more than anything was I was really depressed because I no longer knew who I was. And that started this whole journey on, all right, what are these expectations you'll place upon yourself? I placed this expectation that once I graduated school, I was going to make good money. I was going to be able to live like I wanted to live. I thought all of these things were going to happen. I thought that once I got married, I would be excited. I thought once I had the kid, all these things, I had all these expectations of being a great father, being a great husband, but I didn't have examples for real. I had an example from my grandparents, and that's 2 generations before me, on what a marriage looked like. But my grandmother finally told me the truth about certain things later on, which I should have known probably before I even got married. Right? There were conversations I should have had. I had expectations that this is how marriage. So, like, example, like we place these expectations when it comes to marriage and life. but we don't have like many examples. So my grandparents, they were married for over 30 something years. And I remember asking my grandmother, probably a few years ago, as I was going through my situation in terms with my ex-wife, and I asked my grandmother, I said, Grandma, how was it when you all were married? And she said, I enjoyed everything. I liked everything. She said, but we did what we had to do to make it work. And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, a lot of the years I wasn't happy. The latter years I wasn't happy. I wanted to walk away from the marriage. And this is my grandmother saying this in her 70s. And I said, walk away? I was like, but I thought, here I go. Like, I thought the ways in which you all lived. And she was like, I just wasn't happy. And I said, and it hurt me. Like, I literally had tears in my eyes because I had this expectation that my grandparents had the best marriage in the world. And I figured I would have the same type of marriage that my wife would, I'm not saying like in terms of domestication and all that, because my grandfather was a breadwinner. It was that model of marriage. Like my ex-wife was a worker, but I thought it would be some type of union like that, like how they had. And that expectation, like I think, because again, think about it. We celebrate those couples that have been married 40 and 50 years. You see it in banquets, you see it in churches, you see it everywhere. People celebrate. But no one talks about, out of those 40 years, daddy slept in a different room for 27 of them. Or mama stepped out. Or daddy stepped out and had outside kids. So we celebrate that, right? But we don't have a real conversation about, well, where did this guy come from? It's my brother from West City, And I place these expectations on myself about what a husband should be, what a father should be. And it ultimately, man, it crushed me.
So I think what's interesting is, and you said this earlier, you talked about identity, and I think it's important for us to really be able to have an honest conversation with those individuals who know our beginning, so that we can connect our past and our beginning to not only where we are presently, but where we may be going in the future. If you don't connect those dots, you end up with an identity crisis, right? So I think it's important to really have those conversations about identity, because it's in the understanding your identity that you can frame realistic expectations. Like, if somebody expected me at this point in my life to have produced a music album, they would be in trouble. I would be depressed too, probably, because they putting pressure on me to have produced a music album. And I'm like, but I'm not wired to do a music album. That's not a part of my identity. So really, a part of, I think, what we're saying is that the expectations, both for yourself and for others, ought to be rooted out of who you really are.
Yes.
Yeah. So Dacari, in the book, man, you have some, I would say, some pretty in-your-face chapter titles. I still haven't forgiven myself. I can't stop dreaming about his death. I let Bishop down. I didn't sign up for this. I hate my job. The day she stopped wearing her ring. The sequel, My Son. Man, talk about that.
Well, I think when I talked about I still haven't forgiven myself, my best friend was murdered in 2005. And I went through this real crazy period where I was struggling. I mean, struggling bad with his death. This is the guy I thought would be the best man at my wedding, the guy that would be the godfather of my kids. And when he was murdered, I lost a lot of me. And I remember having dreams about his death. So when I say I can't stop dreaming about it, I had dreams about his death. I mean, weekly, daily. And I remember for 2.5, almost 3.5 years, 2.5 to 3 years, I had dreams. I had a dream that I would die the same death. And when I finally got to Vanderbilt, I went to counseling, and that's when they told me that I I had PTSD. I was diagnosed with PTSD, and they tried to give me medicine and all that. And I talk a little bit about the medicine in the book, and it just didn't work. But I did forgive myself because that night he died, we were scheduled to be together. I just happened to get too busy. And I felt like the year prior to his death, he and I were robbed at gunpoint. And I remember there was a gun on my neck, and then there was one on my side. And I remember my best friend at the time, he was in the car with me, told the guys, whatever, we'll get you whatever you want. Just don't kill my friend. And when he did that, when he said that, I remember thinking, the night that he was murdered, I wasn't there to return the favor. Guys, I get you whatever you want, just don't kill my friend. And I think that started this whole piece with me battling with depression. And so, again, fast forward to the whole piece about I hate my job. I named that because I knew people want to read what that meant. I did a survey on Instagram. The reason why I like social media, it gives you opportunities to pose and questions and all types of things. And so I told my social media audience I would use their data for my book. And so I did this whole poll about jobs for millennials and people in general. And what I realized was that people did not necessarily hate their jobs. They hated their functions in their jobs. And a lot of that came back to purpose. Like, who am I? What am I supposed to do? How do I transition from where you, and I think one of the challenges with millennials, what I've learned is sometimes you can hire us in one space, right? In one season of our life. Like, you hire us right out of college. Say you hire me at, let's just say out of grad school. So probably at 25, 26. Well, when I turn 30, you can't treat me the same way you treated me at 26. I should have evolved by now. Most of the time, I have evolved by now. And a lot of times, I think that when I did that survey, I realized a lot of people were saying they kept me where they met me. I see you still as a student and not as an adult. I see you as, oh, you're just so sweet. You're so kind. But I have a child now, and I'm married now. I have my own house now. I have life insurance. I have, debt, right? So I'm not that same person. When you talk about I let Bishop down, that was a piece in the book where I talk about, I let Bishop down. That had everything to do with the mere fact that I quit on my pastor in the role of serving or being an assistant to him. I quit emotionally, mentally. I checked out. And a lot of that had to do with I just was unhappy doing that type of work and the expectations on the outside and the expectations from those actually now within the organization who felt like they should have gotten that position. It's a weird thing. A lot of people play like they don't want what you have, but you start seeing, well, man, this is what you want. You really wanted this position. And I started to wrestle with people who felt entitled to what I had. And I was like, y'all can have all of it. I'm not going to fight with people over something that I don't even actually feel called to anyway.
So I have two questions on the backdrop of what you just shared. And sometimes I have to remember, because when I interview people and have these conversations with folks, I get drawn into the story myself. And my mind starts just thinking through what you're saying. I'm listening as a listener, but I'm also the interviewer, so I have to balance those two dynamics. I got to ask this question because if I were listening to this conversation on a podcast, one of the questions that I would be asking is, what kind of situations were you all in, you and your best friend, that in one occasion you're held at gunpoint, and then another occasion, unfortunately, he gets murdered? Like, what were the social dynamics going on there? Were these situations where you look back on it now and you say, well, maybe we shouldn't have been in this environment, or was this just regular normal life situations? And like let's talk about that.
Well, I think there were just regular life situations. We were followed from a high school graduation the first time we were robbed. There were some guys that they just set it up. I mean, we had no idea. We left. We were actually in suits. I think I had on a linen suit, something like that. It wasn't like a full suit, but we went to our old high school graduation. walked across the street, got in our car, and the guys actually told us they followed us from the graduation. They said we looked like we had something. And what happened was I pulled up at a gas station just to get gas, and I had the windows rolled down. To this day, I don't even really roll my windows down as much, but they just jumped in the car. Yeah, were we out in the city having a good time with life? Yeah, we were 18, 19 years old, 20 years old, but we weren't into any illegal activities, things like that would warrant this type of behavior. This was just a random act from some guys that wanted to rob whoever they could, and they saw us. You know, we look clean cut. That's what they said. Y'all look clean cut. Y'all look like y'all had y'all life together. Like, these guys were actually having a full conversation with why they robbed us. And the next year, my best friend was killed because he had some rims on his car that some guys wanted. They followed him home. Yeah, it was all over rims. They followed him home. His parents walked out and saw his body. They wanted his car. They just wanted the rims, and they weren't even able to get the rims off the car, which was crazy. So,
wow. So the second question that I've got to ask again, if I were listening to this and just kind of processing what you're saying, because you dropped so much insight, so much wisdom in this conversation. I mean, even that statement, and you kind of had a drop the mic moment, but you skipped right over it when you said they kept me where they met me. That's a whole podcast by itself.
Yeah.
But we'll have to come back to that. But so when I listen to what you've said and some of the challenges that you talked about professionally, meeting expectations there, navigating life, navigating marriage, somebody might argue that some of this is just life. How much of this do you feel like is just life that people have to figure out? How much of this was unique to you and some choices that you made and the uniqueness of your story? How much of this is specific to the culture of millennials and the vibe there and what we've created there? Well, like, let's tease that out some.
Well, I think it's a mixture of all of what you said. It is life happening and me not knowing how to figure out what that is, right? Like, life happens so fast. Like, I remember when I was Bishop Walker's assistant, when I was his assistant, I remember waking up one day and I realized that I was in a new year. Like, literally, I said, oh my God, it's 2012. And life had happened so fast. In 1 year, I had graduated from divinity school, built a house in Nashville, got hired the same year, got married the same year. All of this happened in 1 year. And before I knew, it was 2012. I woke up and I said, oh my God, I'm in 2012. So life happened extremely fast. And life experiences, I wasn't ready for a lot that came with it. So everything was so unique to me. About marriage and this new job. Like, again, when I was at Morehouse, I was a mass communications major, so radio, television, and film was my thing. So transitioning to ministry was vastly different. I did a lot of creative writing, creative thinking, digital stuff, television stuff. And so when I came into a ministerial space where I'm working in church, it was vastly different because most of the people I work with, here's something right here that's really unique. Most of them had not had the exposure I had. So I had real life exposures where I had traveled the country being a student at Morehouse. I had sat down and ate lunch and dinner with the president of Nigeria as a student. I had a different lens on life already. And so I get inserted into a system where my peers, they had no idea about certain things. And I'm like, you all have never experienced this or have you never seen this? So I was wrestling through, one, it's going to sound really bad when I say this, but it's almost like you're in an advanced state and it's not like anybody else. They're not as smart or gifted or talented. It is, I've just had more exposure. Not that you're more gifted or qualified, I'm more gifted, qualified, or talented. It is I've had more exposure, and it started to create this thing where I was dumbing down who I was to fit into that culture. So yes, it's life experiences, it's being a millennial. And one thing about millennials, and I think that we don't get credit for, is We are believers in combined or collaborative learning, collaborative thinking, collaborative doing. We are a generation filled with sharing. You know, let me even make more sense for you. We are the first generation to post a picture of food and get 100 likes. We're the first generation to post a picture of us sitting in our room playing a video game or taking pictures in our house, showing you our living area. We are a sharing generation. That's not something that's unique to older generations, but to us, this is what we are sharers. We share, you know, and so I think that being in organizations that don't understand collaboration and they operate from a hierarchy. Oh, I can't even say the word hierarchy. Say it for me, Christopher.
Top down.
Yeah, I can't even say it. But operates from that model, like this top down model. You could totally misinterpret who we are.
No, I totally get that. You got tongue tied, and then I couldn't say the word either. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's okay. I practice it a lot, so I'm sorry, viewers and listeners. We're both kind of educated, so forgive us for not being able to say it.
Right. So
it happens all the time. You just
yeah. So let me make a left turn here just for a moment, because I think well, let me say this first. Maybe again, you're throwing out so much. This is good stuff. I want to talk about your marriage for a moment, but before I do that, let me just say that I think that even when you talk about the whole sharing, sharing a picture of food and getting 100 likes, or sharing, sitting in your living room and getting engagement there, I think even with that, back to an earlier point, that the 100 likes should not be the litmus test for success. And it sounds like you had to learn. It sounds like you had to learn that in order to figure out how to recalibrate real life.
Yeah. Say that last part again.
Figuring out that you could get 100 likes on Instagram for a picture of your food should not be the litmus test to determine success. It sounds like
right.
you figured out that it's cool to get the 100 likes, but I can't use that as the basics of success for my life.
Right. Right.
And it sounds like what you're saying, you're trying to instigate the mindset in the conversation to individuals to say that whether you get 100 likes, 1,000 likes, let that be what it is. That just, 100 people liked your picture. Don't let that indicate, or don't let that be a barometer of your identity. Don't let it be the measuring stick of your personal value. Don't let it be, don't let it set an unrealistic expectation for your purpose in life. Is that accurate?
Yes. And when I mentioned the whole piece about sharing, get 100 likes, it wasn't so much about the likes as it was the sharing component. We are a generation that we don't mind sharing. And again, ultimately though, to our demise, when you start seeing 100 likes from that, and you don't get the next post gets 12, it could psychologically mess with you. And I think that's anyway. Like, well, what happened? I thought you liked what I was doing. Right. And so again, now there are some that view likes and shares as a measure of success, but we know that's not true. So I'm with you on that it shouldn't be. And I did discover that these likes and shares and they would not be the test that would measure where I am, but it did in a sense bother me. Social media did create an animal, right? Because I gave everybody my highlights. But when I started to fail, I never showed that. And people started saying, well, what happened? I thought you were married. I thought you were in love. Because we always post, oh, happy anniversary. It's our 10th year, our 6th year. And all of a sudden, when the picture started to fade because you gave everybody we shared our world. And so now you can't be mad when people start asking you questions. I let you in. Right. And so when I started having to answer why my wife wasn't at events or why she wasn't on my Instagram, or like these things started to weigh more heavily too.
Let's talk about that for a moment, man. I'm a huge huge proponent, as you know, of marriage and the belief that marriage works. But I also understand that there are times where people learn and grow, and sometimes. So I'll say it this way, and then I'm going to ask my question. I had a conversation with a member of our church, and she said she's divorced. She has two older kids, and I asked her one day, we were having an overall conversation about her ministry involvement, ministry engagement, da 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 da. And her divorce just got final and all of that stuff. She's going through counseling, had gone through counseling. And so I asked her, I said, now that you are on the other side of this, what have you learned? And she said, it's probably going to surprise you what I'm going to say, but she said, I've learned that just because you're married and you're a Christian, being a Christian is not the whole plan for marriage. And I said, what do you mean by that? She said, I assumed that just because we were Christian that it was going to work. I didn't realize that I had to also build my character, that I had to also do this. I had to also do that. Not that Christ is not enough, but being a Christian by itself in marriage is not the only plan. So I guess my question to you as we talk about life stories, that's what this series is about, to somebody that's listening to this. And I think there's some lessons, even though you're divorced, there's some lessons that we could learn from you to keep marriage working. Yeah. And there's some people who are listening to this who are not married, who are thinking about it, or they think that they want it, that again, they can learn some lessons from you. So what would you say to people, now that you're on the other side of this, what would you say to folks from what you've learned and what you've gleaned from it?
Marriage works when you work, right? You have to work it too. I used to hear people say, marriage is hard. And I think people, that's kind of like a cliche statement. I don't think marriage is necessarily hard. I think you have to invest in marriage like you do anything else. There are going to be hard days, right? It's like working out, right? If you want to lose weight, you want to stay in shape. And here we go. If you want to lose weight, that's one thing. The other thing is, once you lose it, you got to stay in shape. It's the same thing with marriage, right? You have a plan in the beginning, right? This is something that I want to do. I'm committed to it. But if you don't work it, you will lose it. And I think that my advice is you have to invest in it as if you're working out or you're eating healthy. Everything about, in order to be, I think, again, this is what I want to say. You have to live in your truth too, right? You can't be married to someone, and they don't know you. Right. I think when it goes back to sharing, you got to be vulnerable enough to say, this is who I am. Are you willing to work with me through this? So, this is something that
So what's interesting about that, let me back up to a point you made earlier. You said marriage works when you work and you got to invest in it. And then you use the example about working out. Well, here's what's interesting to me. I've found that people who are undisciplined have a harder time making marriage work.
Yes. Yes.
And if you've never, people that have never ever had to work hard at something have a harder time figuring out why this is so much work.
Yep. And you are exactly right. I think if no one got anything out of this conversation, it needs to be that piece. I got to a period where I was so unhappy in my job and career that I became undisciplined in my marriage.
Wow.
I had a plan, I was disciplined. I was so committed to trying to figure out who I was in this working environment that I totally neglected my marriage. And I thought that my marriage, like that lady you talked to, would just work. I thought it would just, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. She's not going anywhere. This is we've been together 13 years. We were the AUC couple. Atlanta University Center couple. I mean, she went to Spell when I went to Morehouse. This is going to work. It'll be a shame that we're not together. It'll look bad on both of us if we're not together. And I didn't realize after a while, you can't check out and be emotionally unavailable in your marriage and think that it's going to work.
Yeah, and I think to give people some context, your wife, ex-wife is or was, I'm not sure, very successful in her career. You had a very public career or professional pursuit. And again, from a ministry standpoint, you went to two prestigious universities. You're in the limelight. You're in major rooms with major players for the ministry space. And just like in business, if you follow the script, here's what should happen when you follow the script. And from what you're saying, I think for what you're saying, for people that don't know you, you were following the script, even in terms of the marriage piece, right?
Yes.
Marry this kind of person who's doing this and all of that. And so this is so good. The script doesn't matter if you don't know who you are.
It doesn't matter, man. You just said it. You said it. Because what happens is when you're following the script, you're also becoming the character too. And so you get into character.
Stop.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to let you run past that one. Say that again. Say that again.
I said when you follow the script, you also become the character, right? That's reading the script. And so you become what you think that you follow the script based on the character. So, this is what a husband should do. And so versus being who you are, you start following, you become, Dan from Roseanne, right? You become, this is how we're supposed to live, and I'm following the script. And one day you wake up and Roseanne gone, So
let me ask you this:
yes.
How did you get to a place where you were no longer the bitter ex-husband?
I don't think I ever was bitter as much as I was ashamed and guilty because I didn't do my part. Like I literally, honestly, I quit on my marriage. That's my truth. I quit on it. I didn't do the work to sustain it or even keep it. I didn't try to anymore. And I had this really bad bout with just guilt. Like, you are a quitter. I beat myself up for a year. I mean, a full year. You are a quitter. You aren't worthy. I mean, to the point where I felt like I was unworthy to be loved. So it's one thing to be depressed about everything else that's going on in your world, but then you begin to interrogate yourself. And that was the worst part.
How did you cope with it? Like, how did you get over that hump there?
Well, it's funny. I actually started almost, it was almost, I don't even gonna say how I got over it. I'm gonna tell you, I started with substance abuse. I literally started taking pain pills in the morning, pain pills to go to sleep, and I would wash it down with bourbon and whiskey. I literally wanted my heart to stop. I wanted to die in the house. And one day, my ex-wife and my son came home, and this is how I got over the hump. And I was sitting in the kitchen. I think I just had a couple of drinks, and it was in the middle of the day, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was sitting on the floor in our kitchen, and I'm crying like a baby. I'm crying, and my son walks up to me, and at the time he was 1. But he said it so clear as if you and I were talking. He said, "Daddy, what's wrong?" And I said, "Nothing," but I couldn't stop crying. And he walks up to me, Christopher, and he takes his little infant hand, and he starts wiping the tears from my face. Literally wiping it. And he says, "Daddy, it's going to be okay." I get emotional talking about it. And I knew then that I was never going to allow my son to wipe tears from my face again. I was supposed to wipe his.
Wow.
And from that day, I stopped. It was that day. Because I said he would not see me die in his house. I don't want that to be his memory.
Man, this got heavy real fast. So
yeah.
have you managed life with your ex? What does that look like now? How have you had to reinvent that?
It's a work. It's another investment. If you want your children or your child, and I say this to anyone that's going through it or working through it, if you want your child to grow up in a healthy environment, you have to make it work with your ex. And we've been able to co-parent successfully thus far. We make decisions together. We spend time with them equally. It's not one of those, you get them on the weekend, I get them during the week. Like, we share the load during the week. because she's a pediatrician, so she works in the hospital a lot. I travel back and forth a lot. My mom is there to help a lot. We have a good, strong village, and we're doing our part. Like I can't say emotionally it hadn't taken a toll on him. He has asked questions. Daddy, you and Mommy were married. I saw pictures. What happened? So I share parts of what I think he can understand now. But eventually we'll have to have that serious conversation, and hopefully we'll have it with him together. And hopefully by then we won't be at fault, right? Blaming each other for what happened. It'll be things didn't work out like we wanted them to. I'm hoping that will be the narrative for our son. But we've been able to work well together. I think there's still some pain on both parts with both of us. I think it's difficult for us to see each other sometimes. And it's interesting. Both of us are now dating again, and so that's unique. So
dating each other.
We're doing our part. No, not each other. Other people.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So this will be the last question I ask about this, because this got, and I let me just say on air that I don't take your transparency lightly, and I appreciate you sharing your story behind the scenes today in a way that I think would be therapeutic for others. So I don't take that lightly. I appreciate that.
Appreciate that.
So let me ask this point blank. You would sit on this side of the fence at this juncture in your life and say then that your marriage and maybe even some other things, was it preventable? I mean, your divorce, was it preventable?
Yes, I could have prevented this from happening. Even down to the last day, my ex-wife asked me, "Are you sure you don't want to do a separation?" And I couldn't answer what I wanted. I had asked for a separation before. We already were separated, but I was like, let's go and legally do the separation. And when it came down to the final document to sign the divorce papers, I couldn't say for certain if I wanted. She wanted a yes or a no. And I'm going to tell you what, honestly, I really needed for her at that time to make the decision for us. I know we have the standard where the man should make the decisions, and and you got to be a man of faith. But for me, I saw myself literally, Christopher, on life support emotionally, where I could make the decisions, and I really needed her to step in and be stronger than I was at that time, and not go through with it. Although I had signed the papers, I didn't want to. But it happened, and yes, it was preventable. I could have done more, but I didn't know what to do. It's easier to say, hey, I was already in counseling. We went to 5 marriage counselors. I did. Now, the thing is with counseling, I just didn't do the work I needed to do in counseling because I was so broken over my own stuff. I was so selfish. It was about me. It was about me, and it was so much about me that I couldn't see anybody else.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good stopping point. I think this is a good stopping point for the sake of the discussion. And I say stopping point, I probably should say point to pause, because we're definitely going to have you back for some more conversation, because I think that what we've learned today from folks is, or from you, from this conversation, and I think the value that people can hear and take away from this is a number of things. Number one, it's important, I believe, to make meaning of what you're feeling and what you're sensing and what you're thinking. I think it's important to connect the dots and not to suffer in silence. While you were doing the counseling, or there may be people listening to this who are doing the counseling, or maybe they may have a circle of good advisors and a personal board of directors, if you would, you still got to be committed and resilient enough to do your own work in your own life to get you to the point that you need to be. And then I think finally, and I heard you say this multiple times, and you may not have said this word per se, but I think we really have to come to grips with the power of our own choices, man. The power of our own choices. That we can literally In the Bible, it says that God presents before us life and death, and then He invites us to choose life. And I think the power of that choice, man, is so incredibly. It's powerful. Like I shouldn't have used the word powerful there because it's from an English structure standpoint, but it's powerful. Our choices are powerful. And so I want to encourage somebody today that's listening to this, just embrace your life story. We're going through this series of life stories. You've heard today from Dacari Middlebrooks, his life story. And I'm thankful as one of his brothers that he's still standing, that the horizon in front of him is much brighter than some of the darkest days that he's experienced. And there's other people in your life, if you're listening to this, that are pulling for you, that need to hear your story, that needs your purpose around. And I want to encourage you today, do what you got to do. Fight if you got to fight. Crawl if you got to crawl to find your way to the other side of your dark days. So be encouraged today. Our announcer is going to come and share some more details with you. I want to invite you. We're going to put some links and some references and some resources in our show notes for you to be able to connect with some people, connect with some resources of how to maybe get some help in various areas that you may need help for. But in the meantime, I want to invite you, as I say every single week, to live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes, show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewise-idea-podcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.